All right, so are you ready to dive into this whole fountain, not a drain thing? I've got be a fountain right here, your notes. And I got to say that this concept has really got me thinking about all my relationships in a totally new way. It's like, are we really adding to each other's lives or are we kind of, just sucking the energy out?
It's amazing how that metaphor, it just clicks, right? Fountains, they're all about abundance, giving freely. But drains, well, they take away, they leave things empty.
Exactly. And Be a Fountain, the book, really emphasizes this idea that if we can make that shift, from being more of a drain to being more of a fountain, it can really make a huge difference in our relationships. And they connect this to something called self-actualization.
Right. And, think back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Self-actualization, it's at the very top of that pyramid. And Be a Fountain suggests that the people who are really up there, those who are fulfilling their potential, are way more likely to be those fountain people in their relationships.
So are they saying that someone who's maybe struggling to meet their basic needs, like feeling safe or financially secure, they might be more likely to, I don't know, operate from a drain mentality?
Yeah.
And not because they're a bad person, but because they're just trying to survive.
Exactly. It's not about labeling people as good or bad. It's more about understanding that, well, where we are on that hierarchy of needs, it can definitely influence how we show up in our relationships.
That's so true. So if you're listening, think about where you are on that pyramid right now. How might that be playing a role in your own relationships? It's something Be a Fountain really encourages us to consider.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Be a Fountain talks about this thing called social exchange theory, which basically says that healthy relationships, they thrive on reciprocity, give and take, that kind of balance. And it seems like those fountain people tend to contribute more than they take, which leads to more satisfaction for everyone.
Oh, this makes so much sense. Like, remember when I was telling you about my friend who always expects me to plan everything, but never does the same for me? Total drain situation.
Exactly. And Be a Fountain really digs into practical ways to avoid those kinds of imbalances. They talk about gratitude, active listening, offering support, all these things that really add to the relationship rather than, just taking away from it.
One tip that really stood out to me from Be a Fountain was this idea of active listening. It's something we all think we do, but I mean, are we really? Like, imagine the next time you're in a disagreement with your partner, try putting your phone down, resisting that urge to interrupt, and just really focus on what they're saying, even if you disagree.
Such a good point. The book really stresses that active listening can actually prevent misunderstandings and even de-escalate conflicts. It's like it's a cornerstone of being a fountain, not a drain in any relationship.
And remember, even fountains need replenishing, right? I
Right.
mean, Be a Fountain reminds us about boundaries and self-care. It's like, even if we're naturally giving people, we still have to take care of ourselves or we'll just burn out.
Absolutely. You can't pour from an empty cup. No, right? The book really emphasizes setting those healthy boundaries and, just prioritizing self-care so that we can actually show up as our best selves in our relationships.
This makes me think about that other article we read about freedom and love in relationships. Like, can we really be a fountain for someone else while still holding on to our own sense of freedom? How do those two things even work together?
That's a great question. And that's where things get really nuanced. Be a Fountain suggests that a key part of this fountain mentality is actually being open to influence from our partners. So it's not just about doing our own thing, but really trying to consider their perspective too.
That's interesting. It reminds me of that research by John Gottman on successful couples. He found that accepting influence from our partners is a major, major predictor of long-lasting relationships.
Exactly. It's about realizing that our partners have valuable insights and that being open to their influence can actually help us learn and grow as individuals.
All right, so I want everyone listening out there, think about a time you resisted influence from your partner.
Hmm.
What happened? Could taking a more fountain approach have changed the outcome?
That's such a great question to think about as we move into the next part of our deep dive here. I mean, relationships are a two-way street, right? And being a fountain isn't about being a doormat. It's about finding that sweet spot where we can contribute to each other's well-being while still maintaining our own sense of self.
This is getting good. We're just scratching the surface here, so stick with us as we explore more of these practical tips and insights from Be a Fountain.
Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing to explore Be a Fountain and, how this whole fountain approach can actually play out in our everyday relationships.
So we were talking about accepting influence before the break, but one thing that keeps coming to mind for me is this idea of respect. Like, how does respecting our partners. How does that tie into being a fountain?
That's such a great point. And it's something Be a Fountain really emphasizes, like respecting our partner's individuality, their decisions, even when they're totally different from our own. It's about realizing that they're their own person with their own, thoughts and feelings and experiences.
It's like we can still be a fountain without trying to change our partner into a mini-me.
Right, exactly. In fact, Be a Fountain says that those differences, they can actually make a relationship even stronger. It's about embracing the fact that our partners bring something unique to the table, something we might not have.
This makes me think about my partner's, well, their love for reality TV. I don't get it. At first, it felt like a total drain. But then I started, I don't know, asking questions, trying to understand why they liked it so much. And you know what? It's actually brought a whole new dimension to our conversations.
That is a perfect example. Be a Fountain talks about, finding common ground, even when there are differences. It's not about agreeing on everything, it's about approaching those differences with curiosity and a willingness to learn.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we cultivate that kind of respect, especially when things get a little, you know, heated? Like what happens when those differences kind of trigger us or make us feel defensive?
That's where empathy comes in. Be a Fountain is really big on this, putting ourselves in our partner's shoes, trying to see the world from their perspective, even if we don't necessarily agree with it.
Empathy. Easier said than done, am I right?
Yeah.
Especially in the middle of an argument.
Oh, for sure. But remember that active listening thing we talked about? That's a huge part of building empathy. Really focusing on what your partner's saying, asking those clarifying questions, reflecting back those emotions. It just shows them you're really trying to get where they're coming from.
It's like you're holding up a mirror to their feelings so they know they're being seen and heard, even if, you don't have the answers or solutions right away.
Exactly. And it's amazing how much tension can just disappear when we feel heard and understood. It creates space for a conversation that's actually constructive and, well, compassionate. So we've talked about empathy, we've talked about active listening, we've talked about finding common ground.
Yeah.
What about boundaries? How do we set boundaries in a way that feels supportive and, well, fountain-like, not shut down or defensive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something Be a Fountain talks about too. They actually have a whole section on honoring boundaries in relationships,
Hmm.
recognizing that our partners have their own needs, their own limits, their own preferences,
Hmm.
and, respecting those boundaries even when they're different from our own. Boundaries are kind of like having a personal space bubble.
Yeah.
And if someone keeps bumping into it, well, it's going to cause some friction.
Exactly. And when we honor those boundaries, we're basically sending a clear message. We value our partner's autonomy. We respect their right to make their own choices.
Okay, I get that. But how do we actually communicate those boundaries? It can be so
Mhm.
tricky, especially when you're close to someone.
Well, Be a Fountain suggests starting with being self-aware, understanding our own needs, our own limits, like what are our non-negotiables? What are we willing to be flexible on? What are those things, those behaviors or actions that make us feel uncomfortable or disrespected?
Okay, so once we've figured all that out, how do we actually say it out loud to our partner?
Be a Fountain stresses open and honest communication, picking a time when you're both calm and receptive. You have to express your boundaries clearly and assertively. It's not about attacking or blaming, it's more about saying, hey, this is what I need, or, this is where I'm not comfortable.
It makes sense. It's being direct, but also, respectful.
Exactly. And what's cool is that Be a Fountain even talks about, what to do when those boundaries get crossed. Like, what if your partner doesn't respect your boundaries? Or what if you're having trouble respecting theirs?
Ooh, yeah, that can be tough. What does the book say?
They say it all comes back to communication. You might need to, revisit the conversation, clarify what you need, or even get some professional guidance if you're really stuck.
So it sounds like this whole boundaries thing, it's an ongoing process, just like any other part of a healthy relationship.
Absolutely. It's about showing up, being intentional, practicing that empathy, and consistently communicating those needs and expectations.
Okay, so we've covered respect, boundaries, communication. Is there anything else Be a Fountain says about, about how to keep these healthy fountain-like relationships going?
Yes, actually. They dive into a concept that can be a bit challenging, accepting influence from our partner.
Oh, right, we talked about that a little bit earlier, but I'm ready to go deeper. Why is this accepting influence thing so important? And how does it relate to this whole fountain idea?
Well, the way Be a Fountain explains it, accepting influence is basically being open to our partner's thoughts and feelings, even when they're different from our own. It's about recognizing that, they have valuable insights and perspectives that can actually make our lives richer and make the relationship stronger.
So sometimes we need to admit that our partner might actually know something we don't.
Right. Exactly. When we are open to influence, we're basically saying, hey, I trust your judgment. I value what you think. I'm willing to consider your ideas, even if they challenge mine.
That's a tough one, though. How do we get past that knee-jerk resistance and get to a place where we're truly open,
Mhm.
especially when we're talking about like really deep-seated beliefs or habits?
Yeah. Be a Fountain says it starts with, well, with humility, admitting that we don't have all the answers, that our way isn't always the right way, and that our partner might have some really valuable insights that, maybe we've just overlooked.
So letting go of that need to always be right and being open to the idea that our partners can teach us new things. I love that.
Me too. And when we approach these conversations with that humility, it creates space for genuine collaboration for both of us to grow, which, according to Be a Fountain, is how we really let that fountain energy flow freely.
Okay, but how do we know if we're really accepting influence or if we're just going along with things to avoid conflict? Where's that line?
That's such a good question. Be a Fountain says to look at our intention. Are we really truly considering our partner's viewpoint? Are we asking those clarifying questions? Are we actually willing to make adjustments based on what they say, even if it means stepping outside our comfort zone?
So it sounds like accepting influence takes a certain amount of trust in our partner's judgment and a willingness to put the we before the me, which feels very Sound to me.
It totally does. And that's where that connection to being a fountain becomes so clear. It's realizing that our partner's well-being, it's tied to our own, that their happiness, it actually contributes to the overall health and energy of the relationship itself.
It's like that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Perfect analogy. Accepting influence isn't about losing ourselves or sacrificing our individuality. It's about realizing that we're actually stronger and more resilient when we're working as a team. It's about embracing that shared journey and letting ourselves be, shaped and molded by those unique perspectives our partners bring to the table.
So as we go deeper to be a fountain, it seems like it's not just about the stuff we do, the actions, but also about those qualities we cultivate inside. Things like empathy, humility, and that willingness.
You got it. Be a Fountain is all about developing a mindset of abundance, generosity, and mutual growth. And when we come at our relationships from that place, it creates this ripple effect that reaches way beyond just the partnership itself.
It's like that image of a rising tide lifting all boats. When we're thriving, both individually and as a couple, it generates this positive energy that spills over into every interaction with family, with friends, with colleagues, even with strangers.
What a powerful image. It reminds us that all our relationships, they're all connected in a way. How we show up in one area of our lives, it impacts everything else.
Okay, so as we keep exploring Be a Fountain, it's obvious that it's not a simple concept. It needs constant effort, intentionality, and a real willingness to embrace the messy, complicated nature of human connection. There are no easy answers here.
You're so right. It's a journey of self-discovery, growth, and transformation. And it might not always be easy, but trust me, the rewards are worth it.
Speaking of rewards, Be a Fountain also talks about reciprocity in relationships. Remember how we were discussing social exchange theory earlier? I'd love to dig into that a bit more. How does this whole reciprocity thing fit into the fountain way of thinking?
That is a fantastic question. At its heart, reciprocity is really just about that give and take in relationships. It's making sure there's a balance in what each person contributes so both partners feel valued and supported.
It's like that old saying, it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
You can't have a truly healthy and lasting relationship if one person's always the giver and the other's always the taker.
Exactly. And Be a Fountain says very clearly that when that reciprocity is missing, resentment starts to build, and then you get those unbalanced drain dynamics we talked about earlier. And eventually, well, the relationship just falls apart.
Okay, but how do we make sure there's that healthy back and forth happening? Because keeping score doesn't exactly sound very fountain-like.
You're right. It's not about keeping track of every little thing. Be a Fountain says it starts with, well, with being open and honest about our needs and what we expect. It's about saying what we need from our partner and, just as important, being open to hearing what they need from us.
It's like a dance where both partners are really in tune with each other's rhythm, and they're always adjusting their steps to keep that flow going.
I love that. And when that sense of reciprocity is there, both people feel valued, appreciated, and supported. It creates this beautiful cycle where those acts of kindness, they come back around.
Hmm.
And that strengthens the bond and builds a deeper sense of caring.
So it's not about, making sure every nice thing we do is instantly repaid. It's more about that overall sense of balance, making sure both people feel like what they contribute really matters.
Exactly. It's about building a culture of appreciation and support, a place where both partners can say what they need and know that their partner will listen and want to help.
This makes me think about another idea from Be a Fountain, serving our partners. How does that fit into this whole fountain thing?
That's a great connection. Be a Fountain talks about serving our partners as an act of love and generosity, putting their needs first, not because we have to, but because we genuinely want to make their lives better.
Like that saying, love is a verb. It's not just a feeling, it's taking action to show our partner we care.
Exactly. And Be a Fountain says that when we serve our partners, we're not just adding to their happiness, we're strengthening that bond between us. It creates a shared purpose, a deeper connection.
Okay, so how can we actually serve our partners in a way that feels real and, lines up with this fountain idea?
One thing Be a Fountain really emphasizes is that it doesn't have to be some grand gesture. A lot of times, those small, everyday things make the biggest impact. It could be something as simple as, I don't know, making them coffee in the morning, offering to help with a chore, or just, really listening when they need to talk.
So it's about being present, paying attention, being tuned into their needs, even when our own lives are crazy busy, which, let's face it, can be really hard sometimes.
Oh, it definitely can. But Be a Fountain reminds us that when we're doing those things out of love, when we're being generous because we want to, it doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like a natural way to show that we care.
It seems like serving our partners is such a powerful way to really live out this fountain mentality, giving freely without expecting anything back, but knowing that our acts of kindness and generosity are making the relationship stronger.
You said it perfectly. And it's so important to remember that serving our partners doesn't mean we ignore our own needs. It's about finding that balance, that sweet spot between giving and receiving, so that both people feel supported and happy.
So much to think about. We've talked about respecting each other, setting boundaries, communicating effectively, that give and take, and serving our partners. Being a fountain seems like a whole life approach to relationships. It's about who we are on the inside and what we do on the outside.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about cultivating abundance, generosity, and wanting to grow together. And when we approach our relationships with those things in mind, it really does make a difference.
Welcome back, everyone. So we've been on this journey with Be a Fountain, and we've covered so much: self-actualization, empathy, boundaries, serving our partners. It's a lot.
It really is. But you know what I appreciate about Be a Fountain? It doesn't just throw these big ideas at us and leave us hanging. They give us actual practical steps to actually start living out this fountain philosophy in our relationships.
Okay, so let's say I'm totally on board. I want to be a fountain, bring all that good energy to my relationships. Where do I even start?
Well, Be a Fountain suggests starting with something super simple but powerful, gratitude. They actually encourage us to, take a few minutes each day to just think about what we're grateful for about our partners, all the good things they bring to our lives.
Oh, I love that. It's like that saying, what you focus on expands, right?
Hmm.
If we're always focused on the negative, well, that's all we're going to see. But if we make an effort to notice the good stuff, it can really change our whole perspective.
Exactly. Gratitude helps us appreciate all the good things that are already present in our relationships, even when things are, even when they're tough. It brings a sense of peace and makes us more likely to be generous.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we make gratitude part of our daily lives? Am I like writing in a gratitude journal, meditating on a cushion?
Be a Fountain mentions those things, but it can be even simpler than that. What if you and your partner just made it a habit to each share one thing you're grateful for every night before bed?
Oh, I like that. A little gratitude ritual to end the day. Simple, but I bet it would make a big difference over time.
Sometimes the smallest changes make the biggest impact. And speaking of small changes, Be a Fountain also reminds us about active listening, something we've talked about a lot in this deep dive. It's about really tuning in to what our partner's saying on every level and making them feel like they're truly heard.
Oof, active listening. I know it's important, but I really struggle with it sometimes, especially when I'm stressed or distracted. It's like my mind is already a million miles away.
I know what you mean. Be a Fountain acknowledges that it takes effort, for sure. But the payoff is huge. When we really feel listened to, it creates this sense of safety, of connection. We're more willing to open up, to be vulnerable, and that just brings us closer.
So any tips on getting better at active listening besides, just trying harder?
Be a Fountain has some good
Hmm.
ones. Start by getting rid of distractions. Put your phone away, close the laptop, really give your partner your full attention, make eye contact, nod your head, ask those clarifying questions to make sure you're understanding what they're saying.
It's like you're creating a safe space for them to share whatever's on their mind without worrying about being judged or interrupted, which is honestly a pretty amazing gift to give someone.
It really is. And even when we don't agree with everything our partner's saying, we can still acknowledge their feelings, you
Hmm.
know? Let them know we understand their perspective. It's not about agreeing, it's about getting it.
Okay, so we've got gratitude, we've got active listening. Any other practical gems from Be a Fountain that we could start using right now?
Well, the book talks about the importance of offering support, both emotional support and, practical help. Being there for your partner when times are rough, celebrating their successes, and just lending a hand when they need it.
That seems so obvious, right?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times we miss the mark. Like we try to offer support in the way we like to receive it, not in the way our partner actually needs it.
You're so right. Reading Be a Fountain actually made me realize that, I'm great at practical support, like fixing things, organizing stuff, but my partner really needs emotional support. Just having someone listen to them and empathize makes all the difference in the world.
So paying attention to how our partner receives support best is super important. It's about being there for them in a way that feels real and meaningful to them, not just to us.
Exactly. And Be a Fountain makes a really good point. Support has to go both ways. Just like we offer support to our partners, we need to be able to accept their support when we need it.
It's that whole interdependence thing again. Healthy relationships,
Yeah.
they're all about that mutual giving and receiving.
Absolutely. And this whole concept of being a fountain, it really comes down to shifting our focus outward, not being self-centered, but genuinely putting our attention on our partner and, on the health and happiness of the relationship itself.
It's interesting because Be a Fountain talks about how, when we act from that fountain mindset, it's not actually self-sacrificing. It's like by giving generously and supporting our partner's growth, we actually end up feeling more fulfilled ourselves.
It's a paradox, isn't it? Be a Fountain argues that the real key to feeling happy and fulfilled in our relationships is to give freely, without expecting anything in return.
It's like tapping into a different kind of energy. Not the kind that gets used up when we give, but the kind that actually grows stronger the more we share it.
I love that. That's a perfect way to put it, and I think that's a great note to end on.
We've covered so much in this deep dive, from the psychology of giving to all these practical tips for being a fountain in our relationships. It's been a journey.
It really has. I hope you've all found some valuable insights that you can take with you and, start applying to your own lives.
Remember, being a fountain is something we have to work at. It's about showing up every day with generosity, with empathy, with a genuine desire to see the people we love thrive.
And even the smallest acts of kindness and generosity can have a huge impact. It all adds up to a more loving and harmonious world.
So true. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time with another exploration of fascinating ideas and practical tools for living a more fulfilling life. Until then, keep being